Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at www.mtsu.edu/CEM.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Middle Tennessee State University College of Education. We are in the Center for Educational Media, and we are at the School Counselors Collaborative today. We are so glad you have joined us here in the room and joined us online. The School Counselors Collaborative is part of a larger initiative that we do here at MTSU's College of Education called the PK-12 Collaborative. In our efforts to offer a professional development program that was meaningful and helpful and relevant to educators in Tennessee, we looked for areas of focused, targeted PD and tried to help fill those gaps. And so we started in 2017 with the ELL Collaborative, supporting teachers of English learners. We followed 2 years later with the School Counselors Collaborative, and then our most recent one is the SPED Collaborative. And so we offer topics focused on those areas of practice, and they're presented by practitioners, and they're topics that are requested by practitioners. So we hope by following that model, it is an authentic way to figure out what is PD and what do we need to offer and who needs to offer it. So practitioners will offer topics requested by practitioners. So today at the School Counselors Collaborative, I'm happy to say we had, on site, we had people from 11 different districts register to be here. And online, we have 26 districts represented across the state. We have about 57, 58, 60 people registered on site. So we welcome those online and welcome those who traveled here to be with us today. We have, we've put some materials on the table for you there. One, you can read through that, but an important 3 documents in there are some evaluations, and we will ask that you complete those and leave them with us at the end of the day. So there will be an evaluation for each session in the collaborative today. There's also information about Wi-Fi access. All right. So before we get started today, I want to remind you that we have 3 sessions. Dr. Ertel and Dr. Wilson will take the first one, and following them will be April Ebinger from the Tennessee Department of Education talking about what school counselors need to know about the 504. And following will be Tennessee Department of Ed updates for counselors. But our first session today is really going to be good. It fits another initiative we started here called the Cross Collaborative. We kept getting requests from teachers and counselors saying, our work overlaps. Sometimes the people needed to serve this child are the school counselor and the teacher of English learners and the special education teacher. So how can we bring those discussions together? And so we formed the Cross Collaborative. This first session is very much in that vein, and we're happy about that because we'll talk about mental health issues of children that for school counselors. So, are there any questions before we get started today? Any questions before we get started? Okay, so I'm happy today. There was one other thing I wanted to say. This year, I signed up to be a mentor for the Tennessee Achieves Tennessee Lottery Scholarship, and you know they're a volunteer mentor. So I said, I'm going to be a mentor to help high school kids get on their college route. Well, at our last mentor webinar, they gave a shout out to school counselors. And they said, school counselors are so key in helping these high school students get on track to go to college. And we want to give a big thank you. And so I told them, I'm going to be with some school counselors on Friday, and I will pass the message along. So from the Tennessee Achieves, Tennessee Lottery Program, Tennessee Promise, they thank you. And they thank the school counselors of Tennessee for helping our students get on track to go to college. Okay, that's another thing that you do. So with that, I will introduce our first presenters, Dr. Tiffany Wilson and Dr. Pam Ertel. They are from our faculty here at College of Education, but they come to us with a wealth of experience in the classroom and in schools here. So Dr. Wilson directs the school counselor program here at MTSU, and Dr. Ertel is in the early childhood program. But Dr. Ertel also brings quite a lot of other experience before she was here at MTSU. So these are two experienced educators, counselors, about to spend some time with you. I'm glad you're here, and so please learn, ask questions, interact, and have a good day today at the School Counselors Collaborative at MTSU. Dr. Wilson, Dr. Ertel.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Good. Thank you all so much for being here today, especially on the last day of National School Counselor Week. I hope you all have had an awesome week and been shown a lot of love and appreciation for all the work you're doing with students. As Dr. Clark mentioned, Pam and I have been working together probably, 2 years now?
Probably 3
Yeah,
now.
3 years. So we have a strong interest in trauma and things like that. And so with this presentation we're doing today, we're going to look at how school counselors and teachers can work together to help support students that have mental health issues in the schools. So I'm pretty sure y'all have seen the escalation of mental health issues going on in the schools from the little ones all the way up to the high school age. And so today we just want to talk about ways that we can work together as school counselors and teachers to help meet those needs in the school. So the roadmap today, we're just going to introduce ourselves so you can get to know about us, because we also have a vested interest in this as we're parents and grandparents. And so sometimes I felt like we were talking to ourselves in this presentation on how we can be better parents personally as well. We have session goals, we'll have the content presentation, and then at the end we'll have an assessment and a closure. So a little bit about me. I've been in the field 12 years. I've worked as a high school counselor back in North Carolina. Between two different high schools, two different high schools. I'm also a licensed clinical mental health counselor, and now I just practice doing telehealth. I'm a national certified counselor, licensed school counselor, career development coordinator, clinical trauma specialist, board certified telemental health counselor. I got a lot of letters. And then I've been at MTSU since 2017. And then I'm a twin mom, so I have twin boys that are 10. And so I have a strong vested interest in being a good parent because all kids are different. Even if you have twins, they are still not the same. And so that's another reason why I really enjoyed this presentation that we put together.
Okay. Well, I'd also like to extend my greetings. Thank you for spending a Friday morning with us. As a teacher educator, I'm honored to be here. I truly respect the work of school counselors, and I'm just privileged to be able to share a little bit with you today. So I think I'm in year 44. I think I've lost count. But I was just thinking, as Tiffany was sharing, when I first started teaching in the elementary school where I attended school in New Jersey, I don't think we even had a school counselor in my small private school. And so it was pretty much you went in your classroom, you shut the door, and you were on your own. So thank goodness things have changed, and there are much better supports for teachers to address all the challenges of working with children and families. So I taught elementary school for 9 years in New Jersey, and I always had a passion for not only elementary but early childhood, so many of my summers I spent working in preschools. Then I moved into higher ed. I taught at a university in Pennsylvania I was a professor in the elementary and early childhood program there for 18 years, and then I got the crazy idea to become a dean of the College of Education there, which was a totally different experience. So I've been in higher ed for about 32 years. We moved to Tennessee about 9 years ago now, and just thrilled to be here at MTSU. I'm in the early childhood program, and just really love the student-centered approach that MTSU has for our students here, and that's really one of the things that attracted me to this university. So a little bit about me personally. We're a blended family. We have 3 daughters, all who are grown adults and live in Texas, Colorado, and California. And we have 3 grandchildren. My oldest grandson's going to turn 9 this weekend, and then I have a 6-year-old granddaughter and another 6-year-old grandson. And they have probably taught me the most about working with children and families than anyone. So we always like to share our goals as we do presentations, and I think it's important for us to know what we're trying to accomplish. So our hope for you today is that you're going to gain a collection of strategies that you can use and maybe share with the teachers you work with to collaboratively support parents in positively parenting their children. I think for those of you that are parents, you know, you're always afraid, am I going to mess this child up for life? Am I doing the right thing? And so not only do we want to know that for ourselves as parents, but also for the families that you work with. You want to be able to support those parents in one of the most challenging roles that we could ever be in, the role of a parent. A second goal is for you to be able to identify 2 or more resources that can be used to help parents positively support their children's mental health needs. You interact with a lot of families, and you interact with teachers that also work with families, and so we want you to be aware of some strategies, some techniques, some resources that might help you in the work that you do. So as Tiffany shared, we have a common interest in trauma, and that has really allowed us to work together on a number of projects. Our first project was kind of an interesting one. I had gone to China to visit an orphanage and started thinking about, wow, we really don't prepare our teacher education candidates to deal with the topic of adoption. We really don't support them. And as I learned more and more about adopted children and the challenges that they face, I got connected with Tiffany, and we decided to do a collaborative project where we wanted to find out, what can schools do to support adoptive families? And so we did an online survey and phone interviews, and boy, that was an eye-opener for me in particular in terms of some of the things that were happening and the lack of preparation, particularly for our teachers, in terms of supporting adoptive families and helping them deal with the trauma that children experience. So as we did that study, a couple interesting things surfaced in our results. One of the things that we discovered is that teachers need to understand and respect the diversity of families, that families aren't formed in the same way, and to understand the unique things that happen when families are created through adoption. Probably one of the loudest messages we heard, teachers need trauma training. We really don't do a good job with that in teacher ed. I'd be the first to admit that. And parents kept saying that again and again and again. Also, teachers really need to learn how to communicate and listen to parents. Honestly, as a teacher educator, I was kind of appalled with some of the stories that parents shared with me, how the teachers didn't listen to them, the schools kind of shut them down, kind of talk to them like you don't know what you're talking about. So we really need to work on that communication and to be better listeners in dealing with parents. So professionals must collaborate within schools. The research supports this. The parents were saying that we really need to provide the resources that parents and families need to be able to identify the signs of trauma, to be able to deal with the mental health issues that surface among children, and be able to support them in that process. I think so many times we stick in our own silos, and we can do so much more together. And I know I've learned so much just by working together with Tiffany on these projects, and that has really enhanced my knowledge, and that's really been a blessing. So we believe there are great benefits when school counselors and teachers work together to address these issues, to support the mental health needs of children. And hopefully what we share today will give you some ideas in terms of how you can better support the teachers in your school. I'll be honest, I work with beginning educators, and I know I felt like this as a beginning educator. I thought, if I don't know something, I am not going to tell somebody I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to ask for help because I will look like an idiot. And so I was afraid to ask for that support. We want to train our teachers to know that it's okay. You aren't expected to know everything. There are others with better expertise that you can work with to address these very challenging issues. And so hopefully we'll share some of those ideas with you today so that you can work more effectively and collaborate with teachers.
All right. So in our second project that we collaborated with, just in conversations with school counselors across different districts and things like that, we noticed a significant increase of mental health issues that were popping up. One school district was telling me amongst their elementary age kids that their suicide ideation rate had increased like 60% since COVID. So very alarming numbers we're seeing related to mental health. And so we applied for a grant through MTSU, and we got it, and we used that resources to put a survey out to parents asking them, hey, what do you need to support your kids' mental health? What is needed for your children? And so we surveyed a district, and then we surveyed two of our child entities here on campus to get feedback. So the results of this survey showed that, one, there is a significant need for parents. The top concerns included positive discipline, ADHD, trauma, and anxiety and toxic stress. So those are the top concerns that parents had. But when looking at all the data that we had collected, our first thought was, let's create a program that covers parenting as a whole, and then try to drill down the topics that parents really wanted to hear about. So as school counselors and teachers, we got to understand first that parents are the structure and support of their child as their child grows and develops. Their responsibility as a parent, as you know, is to raise their child, to support their kiddos, and just help them maximize their own personal success. And within that success, we have to understand that our job is not to stop them from failing and to stop them and from learning from their mistakes. We need to encourage that. And so if you read this quote, parents are the scaffold that provides structure and support for the child as he or she grows up. They are to protect and guide, but they don't impede learning or risk-taking. That is kind of the structure that we grounded our workshop in as we created the workshop for parents. The book that we used was The Scaffold Parenting by Harold, how do you say his last name? Koplowitz. He is the director of the Child Mind Institute. For school counselors, the Child Mind Institute is an amazing resource. They have a lot of resources for group counseling and classroom guidance. I think Murfreesboro City School actually was piloting a lot of their resources this past year, and their materials are amazing and they're free. They're free. Okay, I just want to throw that out there. Our favorite cost, right? And so
free.
Right. So, but the Child Mind Institute, even if you're not a school counselor or a counseling background, Child Mind Institute is just amazing for trainings and things like that. So this is what we use as the main source for our parenting workshops. So some suggestions that we got, or just suggestions for school counselors and teachers in general when creating these activities for parents. We said sharing positive strategies through workshops or through communications. And so communications can be a newsletter, can be a podcast, can be just social media. I know I have one student right now at her school. She's working, I think, in Williamson County. They do a podcast to help parents with the application process for college and career readiness. And so they do a podcast, I think, every other week to help ground parents in the college application process. I have another friend at a middle school. She does Wellness Wednesdays, where she sends out tips every Wednesday on just how to better take care of yourself. So there's lots of ways. It doesn't have to be a formal workshop. When I was a school counselor, we used to do parent workshops every month, once a month. And I did them from on anxiety to street drugs to you name it, I probably did it. Scholarships, but I did one one Saturday out of every month. So it doesn't have to be that formal. It can be however you feel like you can connect with your parents, whether that's a weekly post on social media, if it's a newsletter, podcast, however you see fit. But it's a great way to communicate that out to your parents. And we also need to make sure that we're taking the time to listen to our parents. I think listening is becoming a lost art, where we just truly actively listen and engage with people and just not, okay. We really need to make sure that we're actively listening because everybody has different needs. We also want to be sure we're sharing resources. I feel like that's innate. As a school counselor, we're always giving referrals and trying to help everybody, but we need to make sure we don't forget about our teachers as well and making sure that we're sharing those resources with them. One of my students for internship, she literally put together a school counseling binder for her teachers, and it had all the things in it for activities, for de-escalation things, how to do DCS reports, questions to ask. It was a survival kit for teachers, and I was like, that's brilliant, right? And then even for students who she knows may need extra support, she had things for specific students in the binder as well. And so that was given during PD before school started. So I thought that was a brilliant idea. So we got to make sure that as school counselors, we're not just sharing information with families, but also with people within the building to support kids in the school and at home. And again, this is the book that we're using, that we used to create our first workshop. All right, so in the book, it talks about 3 pillars. And these pillars are structure, support, and encouragement. And from these 3 pillars, they help parents and children develop healthy self-esteem and just better coping strategies. So let's look at the first. We're going to look at each one.
Yeah, and I would add, in addition for these strategies being great for you sharing with parents, honestly, I think they're helpful even for teachers for managing behavior problems in their classroom. There's so many applications. You can take these same ideas and translate them for teachers as well as for parents.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're a parent yourself, like we personally have a vested interest in this. So
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. So with the structure pillar, this is really focused on routines, right? We know that children love structure, they love routines, but this also has to do with the communication style that's spoken in the home. It has to do with the way communication is done, the house rules, right, that we have in our house, and just understanding that providing this structure creates a sense of safety for students. And it also helps that attachment that is between a caregiver and a student, because we know that attachment style is critical for the development of students, and that students often replicate the attachment style that they have as a child. And so if we can get in there and help parents improve the attachment, the younger they are, the better their relationships we know with significant others or friendships will be better as they get older. The next pillar is support. This refers to emotional empathy and validation. Encouraging parents to provide space to share feelings and thoughts without judgment and acknowledging the feelings that they're experiencing can be super helpful for kids with disabilities. Now, this can be challenging, especially if parents are not good at, they'll tell you to toughen up, or they don't acknowledge feelings, or if it's a cultural thing where it's not even a concept, right, in their culture. The first school I worked at, we had 750 kids, but 38 languages. And so mental health was not a concept in several other cultures that were in my school. And so trying to figure out how to connect with people who don't even understand anxiety or feelings and things like that was super challenging. But it's really important if we can get parents to understand how to teach kids to express themselves and give them the safe space to do so. Teaching parents to help their kids name emotions, right? We got to teach them what it is, even if it's the smiley face is the sad face, the scary face, you know, the posters and things like that. How are you feeling today? Well, they may not be able to say it, but they can show you a picture of what it looks like, which is a great way. Being available to help the child express themselves, helping parents to just, hey, can you just maybe try to be present for your kid for a couple of minutes? And that can be challenging, especially if a parent is a single parent, maybe working 2 jobs, working at night, or not even on the same schedule as their kid. But by helping children to learn to work through their feelings, right, we can help children to not develop those maladaptive anxiety and emotions and depression that we're seeing right now. And it teaches children at a very early age, if possible, how to handle tough emotions, because we know as adults that can turn into, drinking or unhealthy self-care habits, right? So we want to try to teach them how to handle their emotions at a young age. The support pillar also encourages parents to intervene when necessary. So, we as teachers and as school counselors, we see when kids are struggling. And so the sooner we can intervene and get them the supports they need, the better off the kid will be. And really the parents will too, right? Because they're getting the support their child needs. It can be challenging when parents totally disagree, right? Because we know every parent's not going to say my child needs support or needs help. But if we can get them to see that if you put this plan in place, this will help reduce the anxiety that your child's experiencing or the depression or things of that nature, it can be very helpful for kiddos. With your younger ones, we have to make sure, though, that we have to rule out things, because we got to make sure that challenge could be a disability, it could be developmental, it could be a diagnosis, it could be behavioral challenges. So we have to rule out to make sure that we know what we're working with when we're looking at a specific challenge. But by working with parents and teachers, we can help pinpoint those issues and get the child the support that they need. Another part of the support pillar is that we need to provide instructions. We need to help parents to coach their kids and not do it for them. And I'm laughing because I can distinctly remember one of my seniors, my last year as a school counselor. She was like in the top 15, and I was like, oh, where are you going to college? And she literally looked at me. She's like, I don't know. My mom hasn't told me yet. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, I said, what? And she was like, well, my mom did all my applications, and so I'm just waiting for her to tell me. I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And she was like, yeah. She's like, I'll let you know what she decides next week. I was dumbfounded. I was like, wow, the blatantness of it. And so we have to stop parents from doing stuff like that and encourage, give responsibility to the kid. We teach them, we coach them, but we don't do it for them. And so it's really important that we teach parents how to provide that type of support versus doing the work for them. That was one of the craziest things I ever heard. The last pillar is encouragement. This pillar occurs when we educate parents to gently push their kids to try new things and to take risks. Understanding that by trying new things and taking risks, we teach our kids more independence. We teach them how to recover from failure, because we know that's a huge issue. A lot of children, when they experience failure for the first time, they don't know always how to bounce back. And so we need to teach them that you can recover and that failure is not even really failure, it's just a learning opportunity. It also helps kids not to be afraid to try new things, right? This also goes back to that healthy attachment. When kids have that healthy attachment at home, it gives them that motivation or that ability to, I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work out, I know I can still come home. So that gives them that motivation to try new things. It also helps parents to be that it helps parents to position themselves to be better role models, to teach positive behaviors and provide that corrective feedback in a more loving and supportive way. Because that failure, oh man, when I see kids who've never gotten a B before, and those high flyer kids, those are kids that often get overlooked, but those are the ones they need just as much help as the ones that are failing everything, because they don't know how to handle life when things don't always go their way. So I used to always make a point to work with kids that were my top 10%, just so they know that you're not always going to be at the top, because that's just not reality. So how are you going to handle when life doesn't go your way? So we have to make sure that we're targeting all of our kids. All right.
So let's think about some of the ideas that we presented already. If you're thinking about a child as the building, you as the counselor or the parent, is the scaffold that surrounds the child to provide needed support. So let me just give you a practical example. My grandson, who's going to be 9 on Sunday, he's decided that he wants to be an Air Force pilot, a fighter pilot. Now I'm thinking, now I wonder where that idea came from. Now they live in Colorado, but I thought, I bet he's just seen the movie Top Gun. And sure enough, yes, that was it. But he also has a long legacy. My husband was in the Air Force. My stepdaughter was in the Air Force. My grandson's great-grandfather actually helped to be one of the engineers who designed, I think it was the F-16. So last weekend, he told his parents that he wanted to visit the Air Force Academy. Now, he'd been there many times before. They only live a couple hours away. So on Saturday, they went to the Air Force Academy. And the interesting thing that I'm taking a long time to get to is one of the buildings there, the chapel, which is absolutely beautiful. If you've ever been there, it's just spectacular. It's under construction. And there's scaffolding all around the building. In fact, there's so much scaffolding there that you can't even see the chapel right now. And I thought, what a great lesson for us. Well, as counselors or parents or teachers, we want to scaffold the support of children. We don't want to surround them so much that you can't even recognize them. So it's finding that right balance with the scaffold supports that we provide that are going to be so critical. And a lot of it's trial and error. You know, sometimes we have to put more scaffolding up. Sometimes we take some scaffolding down, and that's okay. And helping parents realize that you can go back and forth with providing those supports is really important. So one of the ideas that we talked about was the importance of helping families establish what we call family rituals. So I'm Italian. One of my family rituals is baking, especially at the holidays. So I make like 1 million cookies. Those are some of the cookies I made at Christmas time. But not only do we make cookies, we give them to everybody. Our neighbors, our friends, our family, the mailman, the guys in the tech office, I bring them stuff. But that's our family ritual, that especially at the holidays, we give out cookies. It's important for families to have rituals. It gives a sense of connectedness. So I want you to reflect a minute. Turn and talk to 1 or 2 people near you. What's your family ritual? What's something you really enjoy doing, either as an adult or maybe something you did as a child? And if you're with us online, maybe you can just jot your family ritual in the chat. Take a few minutes and share your ritual.
We have game nights, like we're having one tonight, so.
See, that's awesome. I wish we did that, but my family's so disconnected.
I feel like they live everywhere.
Yeah, they
so.
live everywhere, and
See, I live the furthest away of the US.
So would anyone like to share with us one of your family rituals? Any brave souls? Doesn't have to be something super elaborate.
I can.
Thank you.
We always used to have game nights, and that has kind of transitioned into us being adults, and, you know, we now do like board game nights as much as we can. We're having one tomorrow night.
All right. So game nights, that connects a lot of families. It's fun, it's engaging, it gets everybody to attend to each other, to be together. That can really be powerful. It's funny, I was thinking about that as I was driving here today. I thought, as a kid, I played games with lots of friends, but I never remembered doing that as a family. And to this day, I hate games. And it's like, why do I hate games? This is so stupid. It's such a fun thing. But I just have this thing in my head. So I wish I kind of grew up in a family that liked games. All right, somebody else. What's your family ritual? Something that bonded you as a family. Anybody want to share? What was your family ritual?
So we danced a lot.
Cool.
And music. And so, with my kids now, we dance a lot. In fact, my boys are at BizTown this week, and they're the DJs for their jobs. So music is very ingrained in our family. So,
yeah.
Are any rituals that y'all want to start? We can always, start one. Anything anybody wants to start.
You wish your family did.
Yeah.
I know with my family, We've had, our son got married and everything, so he's not at home a lot. But we do family dinners every Tuesday and Friday.
Family
so that
dinners.
way we make sure that we're together, you know, and that gives us our time to kind of catch up and see how everything's been going.
Nice. Do we have any Blue Blood fans in here? On Blue Bloods, they have dinner together as a family every Sunday night. I think that's so cool. Yes?
I noticed that our rituals have changed with the kids getting older. We're a lot more structured when they were little. Dinner, going to bed, and our playtime. And now that they're older, and our youngest one is 18, we don't as much have the dinners, but we do have that time where we come together.
All right, so it may not be a formal dinner, but you make a specific time to come together, to be together. Think about the security, the bond that creates. So as counselors, one of the things I'd encourage you to think about, even as you work with not only families in establishing rituals, but think about even working with teachers, encouraging them to establish classroom rituals. You know, some teachers stand at the door and they have fancy handshakes that they do with kids as they come in the room. What a great ritual to greet kids, or even just greeting them by their name. Or maybe they start out with a morning meeting to give that sense of cohesiveness, like we're all in this together. Those are really important things that establish a sense of community, a sense of bonding, which helps children feel more safe and secure. So it really is powerful support. So I really would encourage you to think about sharing this idea with not only parents, but also teachers that you work with. All right. So scaffolding consists of planks that help provide support. These are the planks that you're going to come back to again and again and again as you scaffold children. One very important one is patience. I don't have to tell you as school counselors that it takes time to bring about behavioral change. Slow and steady wins the race. Things are probably not going to change overnight, so we really have to be patient and wait for some things to change and improve as we're dealing with children and families. Very important. Warmth. We have to encourage parents as well as teachers to model love, compassion, kindness. I have a big sign on my door, kindness matters, because one of the things that concerns me as I go out in schools is sometimes I don't feel a lot of compassion and kindness. I'm thinking, why are some of these environments almost hostile? We have to change that atmosphere. You can still be firm but kind. And so children need that warmth. That is so important. And the adults in their lives have to model that in their families, in their classrooms. That is all absolutely a critical plank to the scaffolding that we provide for children. So we have to come back to that again and again and again. We have to think about, when I have to share something, even if it's a difficult thing, have I shared it in a way that's compassionate and kind? As I work with teacher candidates, I go out to the schools and observe them when they do their practice lessons. And sometimes I have to really exercise the warmth when I'm trying to deliver a message of something they need to work on. And so that there's a careful balance there in speaking the truth in love when you have to address difficult issues. Awareness. We have to tune in. We have to be present. I know this is something I struggle with because so many times I'll be, even with my own husband, he's talking and I'm scrolling on my phone. I'm thinking, I'm not really in the moment here. I need to practice awareness. And so we have to get parents to do that with kids. We have to get teachers to do that with their students. As counselors, you obviously want to be aware and tuned into the people that you're working with. So that one is really, really important. And in this digital age that we live in, there are so many distractions. It just amazes me. And I was thinking, we went out to eat the other night, and I'm looking around and there's screens everywhere. And I'm thinking, what happened to the days where people would go out to eat and actually talk to each other versus being focused on what's on the screen? You know, we live in a society where we're not present very much, and so we really need to practice that and have to train parents to be in the moment, to be present, to tune in. That's really what kids want. Dispassion. This is challenging, to stay calm even when things get heated or difficult or uncomfortable. We kind of have to be the steady balance in the situation. And so helping parents understand that even when your child's acting out, or even if something sad or horrific happens, we have to try to stay calm for them, because they're going to be looking to us to know how to respond to difficult situations. So this is one of the planks to the scaffolding that is very challenging, to be quite honest. But helping parents understand that if they have a meltdown because of something difficult, that does not really send a great message to their kids in terms of how to handle difficult situations. So emphasizing the importance of staying calm during difficult situations. And then the last plank is monitoring, keeping your eye on what's happening. We have to be aware of things going on around us so that we can address them appropriately. As a parent, particularly in this day and age, we have to be constantly aware of everything going on in our child's life. What are they looking at on their screens? Who are they hanging out with? Who are their friends? What kinds of media, TV shows and movies are they watching? All those things are going to influence them. And so if we're going to provide the proper scaffolding, we have to be aware of that's an important part of what we do as adults. So helping parents understand that part of their job is to monitor that. That doesn't mean we want parents to police their kids, but we want them to have an awareness and interest in what their child is doing. So one of the things we want to think about is, what are the specific strategies that we can share with parents and teachers to help have the best possible scaffolding and supports for kids. And this one I know is near and dear to Tiffany's heart: secure yourself first. All right? As counselors, I'm sure you're very aware of the importance of self-care. That is absolutely essential. If we want to grow strong, competent kids, we have to model and practice our own self-care. And we're probably the worst ones to do that sometimes. I'm trying to learn to be better at that. And it starts obviously with proper rest and nutrition. Again, parents are setting an example for their children, and so we want to encourage them to model good practices of health and nutrition. Sometimes as we look at, as professionals, your lives are super busy. The parents you work with, they're super busy. Encouraging them to have some of that me time, some alone time, where they can do something they enjoy or just have some space. How critical that is to their ability to be there for their children. Same thing with teachers. Tiffany came and spoke to my early childhood students the other day, and we were watching a video of one of the schools in Nashville, Fall Hamilton, and they had, I forget what it was called, but the teachers had the tap out?
Tap in, tap out.
Tap in, tap out, where the teachers had the option, if they needed a minute to just get it all together or just take a break, that someone could come and be in their classroom with their kids. How important is that? We all have moments where we just need an escape for a few minutes to kind of self-regulate. So helping parents understand that they need that me time, they need that time to regroup and self-regulate. One of the scaffolds we don't think about enough in terms of our self-care is laughter. That is so important. We have to be able to laugh and sometimes just not take life so seriously, to enjoy something that's funny. That will be great to model that for our kids. I know as a classroom teacher, when I would do something that was, if I made a mistake, I would just laugh at myself and say, oh, I can't believe I did that. And let them understand it's okay to make a mistake and you can laugh about it. You don't have to beat yourself up when you don't do things perfectly. So parents can model that, teachers can model that. That's really important. And then the other important scaffold that they talk about in the book is for parents to have adult time, to have adult conversations, to be away from children. And again, in the economy that we live in and the busyness of our lives, you have to make an effort for that to happen. Because otherwise something else is just going to take its place and take your time and schedule. So you have to be intentional about these things. And I think maybe one of the things perhaps school counselors can help with is to give parents permission to do this, that it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's essential to have some adult time. So helping them understand this is good. You are doing something good for your child when you're having some adult time. So that is perfectly appropriate. You know, sorry, go ahead.
On my clinical work that I do as a clinical counselor, when I do intakes, I always ask clients, what do you do for fun? That is the number one question that people cannot answer. And that is, to me, is the saddest thing to me, because you don't know what you enjoy anymore, right? And so I think, as Pam was saying, we have to tell parents it's not selfish to take care of yourself. And in fact, to do it effectively, you have to know who you are as a person, right? And if you don't know what makes you happy, that's the problem right there, because you need to give yourself time to learn about who you are as a person, and you need to ask yourself that question periodically, because who you are today is not going to be who you are 3 or 4 months from now, right? We change, we grow, we have experiences and things of that nature. So explaining that to parents so they don't feel that parent guilt, oh, I can't, I got to be all of it. No, you don't, because if you're not good, then your kids are not going to be good. So this is definitely, I'm a firm advocate for self-care. I tell my students have to do a self-care plan every semester. Like, it's a requirement, because I want them to really focus on making sure they're okay. And we need to give that same gift to our parents so that they know it's not selfish to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm. You know, and perhaps one of the things as counselors that you might be able to do, we talked about the importance of sharing resources. Are there some groups or places that have respite care for parents where they can have a night out? One of the things my church is doing in 2 weeks is for our families that foster children or adopt children, we're having a respite night where some of the members of my life group are going to go and take care of the kids so their parents can have a few hours to themselves. So whether it be a church, whether it be a sorority or fraternity that's doing something like that, find different groups maybe in the community that might provide this type of service so that parents can have a little getaway. After I got divorced, I was a single parent for 15 years. Having adult time was really difficult, except for the times where maybe my daughter was with her father. It was difficult to carve out time for me, and so it's really important for our single parents also to have that, and they may really need the resource of someone else who can come beside them and care for their child so that they can have some of that adult time or me time. It's just so important to their well-being. So we want to make sure they understand that's really important. I haven't learned this first one, but establish a realistic schedule. That's really important. But I think particularly as you work with parents, it's important for them to establish a realistic schedule for their children. Now, as a grandparent, I've got a lot of marks on my tongue where I've bitten my tongue and tried not to say things to my kids about, maybe you've got your kids a little overbooked. I just hold those words back. But we need to be careful about not overbooking kids' schedules so that they're running somewhere every night of the week. And we see so many kids that are doing that. There's so many great things for them to be a part of, but sometimes it's too much. So we need a realistic schedule based on that child's age, their personality, their interests. We have to find something that's realistic. Celebrate the baby steps of getting there to making efforts for self-care. So maybe you took 5 minutes and read for pleasure. Celebrate that when you're able to make those changes. It will happen over time. The more you do it, the more success you'll have. So encourage parents to celebrate when they move forward in making some self-care efforts. Meditation, having a spiritual focus, can be a great way to help provide that self-care. So being aware of resources that are available to you in that realm.
And I was going to say with that too, apps are a great tool. Know the apps that are free. There are tons and tons of meditation, spiritual focus apps that are free. I would highly recommend getting just a list of those that you can share with people, and with the students as well. Because I know when my boys were like in kindergarten, first grade, they would do animal yoga every morning to get the day started. That's what their teacher did, and it was the cutest thing. I mean, and then we would do it at home. So just different things that are free for parents and giving them those resources and that teachers can use in the classroom is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we just found a resource recently that's really cool. I feel like it'd be good for kids, but I mean, I'm using it. It's called Finch. It's it's an app. It's like kind of like a Tamagotchi, like where you're taking care of a little animal on your phone. But to take care of the animal, you have to take care of yourself. So you like establish a routine on the app. My first goal was to like drink more water. And in order to take care of the animal, you have to tell it you drank more water. You can do meditations. Cool. It has like all of the suicide hotline numbers on it. It has like everything you can possibly think of, meditations, everything. And as you take care of yourself, the animal grows and it goes on adventures. It's very fun.
So is it F-E-N-C-H?
I think it's F-I-N-C-H. It's very cute.
Okay, very cool.
That is.
Great. Sounds like an interesting resource to check out. It's really important that kids see their parents and the adults in their life unplug. Very important, because they're watching us. Yes. They're learning from us. And I know, with my adult kids, I realize as we do FaceTime each week or whatever, whenever we do it, as they're asking, well, how are you doing or what are you doing? And I'm listing all the busy stuff I'm doing, and I'm thinking, I am not modeling good self-care, because all I'm talking about is how busy I am versus what kind of stuff am I doing for fun and unplugging. So no matter how old they are, they need to see you unplug. And again, that can be true for teachers too, for teachers to talk to their students about what they did for self-care, what they did for fun, what they did as a ritual with their family, to see that they're people too, and that this is an important part of life, that we take time for ourselves to enjoy being with the people that we care about.
Yeah,
really
I was
important.
going to say, the boys a couple of months ago was like, Mom, you're a really good driver. And I was like, okay. And they were like, because you can drive and be on your phone at the same time. I was like, noted. I was like, let me get off my phone while I'm driving. So that fit right there.
That is great. That is great. I read something last night. It said self-care is self-respect. I thought, that's so true.
That's good. That's powerful.
Self-care is self-respect. You care enough about, you respect yourself enough that you're going to do something to take good care of yourself.
That's tweetable. And what Oprah says, it's tweetable.
One of the things we need to think about in this whole self-care issue is our screen time. Sometimes we don't realize how much time we're spending on our screens. And so again, we're setting an example for our students, our children. We need to make sure that we're not overdoing it in that area. And those little monitors that tell you how much time you're spending are really enlightening sometimes. So that can be a good check on our behavior. So scaffolding strategy number 2 is design a new blueprint. Now that sounds a little weird. I built 2 houses in my life, and we started out with both houses with a blueprint of what the plan was going to be for the structure. Sometimes you have to update and change old blueprints. So what worked for you as a child may not be appropriate for your child or children that are growing up in this day and age. And I have to constantly catch myself as I'm getting older to keep that in mind as I'm thinking about what's appropriate for kids and my grandkids. So sometimes we have to update outdated blueprints that might not work for the situation that we're in. And we have to help parents understand the importance of that too, because I see this even with teacher candidates. The research shows, and this kind of makes me sad, I hate to even say it, but we do all these things to train teachers, and you know what a lot of them do? When they start teaching, they emulate the teachers they had as kids and kind of forget about everything they learned. And I'll just give you an example of that. In my own life, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but when I was teaching elementary school, I started working as an adjunct professor, teaching a course in early childhood at a local college. So I'm thinking about my first class, and it was a relatively small group, and there was kind of a table. And as I'm teaching the class, Sitting at the table, reading my notes off my index cards. It was deadly. It was awful. And finally, thankfully, one of my colleagues said, you know, you might want to think about getting the students more engaged. I thought, duh, I know telling is not teaching. I know the importance of student engagement, but what was I doing? After all the things I knew about good teaching practices, I was modeling one of the professors I had in my undergrad program, who I really liked. Now for me, I loved that she sat there and lectured from her index cards, but that's not a really good learning style for most students. So I quickly, thankfully, changed my teaching practice, but we tend to fall back on old patterns and think that's gonna work, and it doesn't always work. So we have to be willing to change the blueprint and work with the situation that we're in. Another strategy regarding the blueprint is we want to focus on what's working or what a child is doing correctly versus just focusing on what's wrong. It's real easy to get caught up, especially if a child has some challenging behaviors. We do all this negative tracking. We're just focused on what are they doing wrong, and then that becomes our mantra. Oh, they're always doing this, they're always doing that. We need to focus more on what's working, what are they doing right, how can I build on that? And the suggestion is from the researchers who wrote the book that we should have a 3-to-1 ratio of comments of appreciation versus criticism. Think about that. 3 times more comments of appreciation versus criticism. Think about how that would change your marriage, your friendships, your family relationships, your relationship with your colleagues, as well as working with children and families. So if we can encourage them to think about that goal, that is really powerful. That can be transformative. And so we really want to get our focus off everything that's going wrong and focus on what's going well. How can we build off of that? That's not to say you ignore the things that need to be addressed, but there's a way to come at it where we can focus on the appreciation and the positive rather than just the negative tracking.
One thing I want to add to that too, I know when I was a high school counselor, one of the things I would do for my kids who were on my list, we all have that list, I would make a point to try once a week to call the parents to tell them something positive, so I'm not always calling about something negative. And the appreciation parents would get from that, like, okay, my child's not terrible. No, they're just making bad decisions. Your kid's not a terrible person. And let me tell you something great they did this week. And that can really change the relationship that you have with your parents and with the kid too. So I think that's...
Yeah. Typically focusing on what's not working doesn't work towards moving us towards good behavior. Mm-hmm. So we really need to kind of not, again, I don't want to say we don't address difficult things, but we need our focus to be a little bit different sometimes. The other thing to be aware of in terms of our blueprint is to not get caught up in the society shaming, you know, the kind of idea of keeping up with the Joneses or doing what everybody else is doing. You know, I think about first-time parents and their concerns about their child's education, and they've got to get them in the best preschools, and you know, because they need that to get into the best colleges, and so, or my child's not in 3 different activities. What, you know, what's wrong with them? So to try to encourage parents not to get into that, because it's going down the rabbit hole. It's a trap. It is a big trap. There's a preschool not far from where I live where literally, I still can't believe this just blows my mind. The parents line up at 2 in the morning to be there to register their children for preschool for the next year. Now, I'm an early childhood educator. I believe in the importance of early childhood education, but there's something wrong with this picture. If we're online 2 o'clock in the morning, waiting to get our kids online on the list for a preschool. So we just need to be careful about that society shaming and how we address that. All right. Other ideas about the blueprint, designing the new print. As counselors, you know the importance of data. Keep track of the things that we're concerned about. We may find it's not as big a deal as we think. Encourage parents to do that. They might think that their child's coming into their bedroom every night because they can't sleep alone. Well, maybe it's only 2 nights a week. You know, so have them get some concrete evidence, some data to support the behaviors that they're seeing, to identify, is this really a problem, or are there certain pieces of it that make it more problematic? Maybe there's a certain time of day that some of these concerning behaviors surface, and so the data will help us in the problem-solving process. For both parents and teachers, it's important for them to be aware of self-fulfilling prophecies. Probably true for you too as a counselor. You know, it's real easy for us to kind of stereotype a situation. You know, you were talking about listening before, and I think so many times when I'm listening, when I think I'm listening, I'm already formulating my response in my mind instead of really listening to what the person is saying. So don't write kids off or even parents off because of what we might be wrongly assuming. Or, you know, if we begin to treat them in a certain way, they're probably going to live up to that. So we want to focus on having faith in them that they can change, that this can get better, whether it be the child or the parent. They will live up to what our expectations are. If we have really low expectations, then that's probably all we're going to get in response. So we need to be careful about that.
And the other thing I just want to add too is making sure that we teach children and parents to combat those negative thoughts with truthful thoughts.
Yes.
Right? Because a lot of times what they're thinking is not true, right? And so we need to teach them that, okay, this is a negative thought, but what's the truth? What's a truthful thought to combat that? So a lot of that CBT work for parents and students both.
Very important. For both parents and teachers, and probably as counselors also, we have to give new strategies time to work. You know, just assume, boom, I told them the strategy, they're going to try it, it's going to work next week. That may not be the case. Some of the research says it could take up to 3 months for certain new habits to form. With my teacher candidates, I teach about classroom management, and so sometimes the teacher candidate will try something out and it didn't work, so they want to abandon the strategy right away. I'm like, no, you've got to give it time to work. You have to reinforce it and practice it. You can't just abandon an idea because it didn't work the first time you tried it. So we have to hang in there and give the strategies time to work, time for those behaviors to change. We're dealing with human beings, so it takes us a while to do things differently. So that time piece is really important to think about. Strategy 3, in terms of our scaffolding, deals with laying a solid foundation. If you're building a house, you want to have good materials to form that solid foundation. In a parent-child relationship, you want to encourage parents to have a solid foundation. One of the best ways to do that is to be present. To be present. That's really what kids want. They want our time and attention. My daughter was talking with her boyfriend, and he was trying to plan something special for his mother's birthday, and he was going to send her on a trip with her friends, and he had all these ideas, and she didn't want any of them. And my daughter said to him, you know, she really just wants time with you. That would be the best birthday present for you to do something with her. I think sometimes we forget, no matter how old our children are, being present is a priceless gift. And so we want to encourage both parents and teachers to be in the moment, be present, to build that solid foundation. And to validate your child's emotions. Tiffany talked before about how important it is to help kids learn how to name their emotions. So this is my stepdaughter Ashley and her son Knox. So Ashley's a social worker in the Air Force. And so Knox has grown up with all the social worker lingo. So he is like so in tune to his feelings. It is just a riot. Like he's always telling us how he feels and what he thinks about things, but he's so sensitive and so sweet. But you know, you can tell he's grown up in that climate of naming his emotions and letting you know when he's happy or sad or concerned about something. And it's just precious. But it's important for kids to be able to name what they're experiencing. Emotional regulation is a biggie. Helping kids regulate their emotions, helping parents understand the importance of that, helping teachers understand the importance of providing strategies for children to regulate their emotions. Attachment rituals are a great way to help lay that solid foundation. Again, the teacher standing at the door doing the fancy handshake with kids, or just even greeting them by name. In families, what are we doing to have that bonding, whether it's our dinner night, whether it's our game night? What is it that helps us to attach and bond to each other? Maybe we go someplace special on vacation every year, or we have a favorite restaurant that we like to go to. Doesn't matter what it is, it's the fact that there is a ritual that connects all of us, that we share. So important for families to have what we call non-judgmental quality time. In other words, to have fun together. We need to think about how we can do that. It doesn't have to be anything super elaborate. It's just that we're doing something together and that it's fun. That is really important to laying a solid foundation of the family.
And I would add to teaching parents that when kids say things, like we need to be non-judgmental because they're kids, they're trying to learn. I know over Christmas, we had went back home to North Carolina for a couple weeks, and we were watching TV, me and my husband, and the boys was like, y'all didn't tell us all the cuss words. What? We were like, wait a minute, like out of the blue, right? And so I was like, okay, let me turn the TV off. We're going to have a discussion about the words we didn't share with them. And I wasn't ready for everything that they said, but we had to dispel a lot of things that they had learned from their friends, and they just thought that was the perfect time. But the way we responded, you know, it was good. We responded in a way that was non-judgmental, that they could really express their 10, right? They could really say what was on their mind. There was no laughter. Well, my husband at the end, but you know, we gave a nice non-judgmental space, and because that helped them to know that they can come to us whenever they need to communicate, and they're not going to be made fun of, or they're not going to be, you know, judged and anything like that. And so teaching parents how in any communication really with their kids, we need to have that non-judgmental approach to that and teaching them what that looks like.
Yeah. We're probably going to hit this in one of the other slides, but I want to say it now before I forget, that about not making fun of kids, not teasing them, particularly regarding their weaknesses. That is so important. I hate to say it, but like middle school, high school teachers, sometimes they think that's like a cool thing to do, but it's devastating. I can still remember my 9th grade earth science teacher. He would like cut you down with his teasing that was so humiliating. You know, and you know what kids are like at that age in front of your peers. Not a good strategy. So we really need to be careful about that teasing part and how we use humor. Yes. So important. So positive reinforcement, we like to call it the super glue of parent-child relationships. Children need to be positively reinforced when they are doing something correctly, but it's got to be sincere. It can't be fake. Kids can see right through that. It has to be meaningful. One of the things we try to train our teacher candidates to do is when they give children feedback, to be specific instead of just the good job. What was good about it? To be specific. They have to do a special licensure portfolio called EdTPA, and in it, they have to demonstrate that when they're giving a child feedback, they can say something positive. They can also address a weakness with a suggestion for how to improve on it. So it's all about that positive reinforcement and being specific. Assume nothing. Don't assume kids know what you mean. You have to spell it out. And make your expectations visible. Sometimes we have to physically demonstrate something to them. We have to be very clear because kids are not mind readers, and sometimes we assume they're going to know what we mean, but we have to be very specific about what our expectations are. That's an important part of the scaffold. One of the things we sometimes get caught up in is focusing on the accomplishment rather than the effort that it took to get there. And so one of the suggestions from the Child Mind Institute is to praise the behavior and the effort that the child exerts, not so much the end result. A lot of things that kids are going to do are not going to be perfect. Their behavior is not going to be perfect, but we can praise their efforts in working towards that. So if we help parents understand that, that's really important. If we help teachers understand that, that's really important. Use corrective feedback. Focus on the behavior. What can you do to make this better? Giving kids a chance to redo something is very important. and link the good behavior with appropriate rewards that are connected to the behavior. That also is a good strategy that helps in dealing with positive reinforcement and making it worthwhile. Scaffolding strategy 4 is to hold steady. You don't want that scaffolding to fall apart. Bad weather happens, life happens. You've got to be that umbrella protecting that child. Not doing everything for them, being a helicopter parent, but you've got to stay calm during difficult times and face crises with control. It's not about you. We got to focus on what they're going through. Kids are going to look to us to see how we react. Now, I'll admit, I am a coward. I hate flying. I used to love it, but I hate it now. I hate turbulence. I hate bumps. So I'm always looking at the facial expression, the body language of the flight crew to see, are we okay? Kids do that to us too. They want to see, are we okay? Is it going to be all right? Our body language, our words have to reflect that. We've got to hold steady, even inside if we're falling apart and we're scared and unsure of what's happening. We've got to be that umbrella for them. Very important. We have to role model the appropriate expression of emotions. We don't want to be robots, but we also need to not overreact to things. I can remember as a child going to funerals, and my one aunt was like kind of a drama queen at funerals. I mean, she would just get hysterical and just be a mess. And I'm not saying you can't express emotions, but we can surely share our grief with kids, but we need to do it in an appropriate way. And sometimes I think we forget. And we step into what's called parentification, where the child becomes the parent. As I look back on my years as a single parent, I know this is an area where I could have done so much better. I know there were way too many times I shared things with my daughter or leaned on her in ways I shouldn't for her age, all right, where she had to be more of a support for me. That's not appropriate. Adults should not do that for kids. And so we need to help parents understand, yeah, we all have challenges that we face, but you've got to turn to other adults for your emotional support and not rely on your kids. That's so important. They need to understand that. So that's one of our jobs, is to communicate that to them. Very, very important. All right. Fifth strategy of the scaffold, staying on their level. When I work with my early childhood teacher candidates, I say when you're talking to kids, when you're disciplining them, you want to get down to their level, not be standing over them. That's very intimidating. Well, this scaffold idea kind of applies in a similar way. As we were just talking about, help the child name their emotions. What are you feeling? Are you angry? Are you scared? Are you sad? Use language they'll understand. You know that as counselors. Tame your tone. That's a tough one sometimes for us as parents to think about the tone we use. But we also want to help parents understand that connect with kids, find out about their interests, what interests them. We need to be careful that we don't rely on our kids to fulfill the things that we weren't able to accomplish in life. They're their own person, so we need to be careful about that. But we have to help them connect with their children. So we can share experiences as adults with our children, but the focus should be on them. We don't want to make it all about us, and so we need to be careful. When kids share something with us, we have to listen without judgment. We need to be very careful in terms of how we react, even if it's something shocking. I know that's something I struggle with sometimes, to try not to react in a negative way when it's something I don't want to hear. But that's important, because if they feel like we're going to lose it, they're not going to feel safe sharing with us. Sometimes we think they want more information than they do. When they ask questions or share things, age-appropriate responses. Helping parents understand that Sometimes parents get scared if kids ask difficult questions, helping them understand. Sometimes it's just a simple explanation that they need, that we don't have to share everything. So for instance, if a child has questions about sex, they might think, oh my gosh, how am I going to explain all this to them? Where they might just have a tiny little question that they need answered and might not be the whole experience that they need to know about. Children's literature. For years, I've been studying bibliotherapy, using children's books to help kids deal with problems. There are so many great books out there that can start conversations with parents and children. I'm sure you know as counselors to use that. Teachers, I encourage teachers to use that, but very important, as I'm sure you know, always read the book first. Make sure you know the content before you recommend it to a parent or a teacher. That's going to be absolutely important to their success. Just some other thoughts about connections, playing together. We heard some of the rituals, playing games, watching TV, movies together. Tiffany, you shared how you do that with your family. Laughing together. Lots of good things that help.
Talk about strategy number 6, which is the empower growth strategy. So in supporting this, and with this strategy, we can help parents support their child with instruction and helping them find answers to their challenges. We need to understand that children, we know, develop in different ways, and so every child's not going to develop the same way. Being a mom of twins, I'm seeing that even with kids being born at the same time, they're developing in different ways. So we can help parents to recognize that we got to encourage children, encourage their efforts, and understand that development is not going to look the same for every kid. Another part of this is that we need to encourage parents to allow their children to fail. Failure is one of the most powerful tools that we can use for learning, even as adults, right? Because within failure, it strengthens and develops our emotional armor as children and as adults. And so we need to make sure that we give parents the understanding of how powerful that learning space is and how important it is for children to strengthen up their emotional armor. And not so much preventing them from making mistakes.
Yeah, I don't know if you see this with your students, and maybe you see this with the people that you counsel, but I found the current generation, at least of young adults, find it very difficult to hear constructive criticism. I've got some kids that as soon as, I'll try to start out, with the Oreo cookie approach, start with something positive, then the tough stuff, then the good stuff. I try to start out with the positive, but as soon as I get to some of the things they need to address, they shut down. They don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're in denial, and it's really difficult. And I think part of the problem is they've not grown up realizing that it's okay to make mistakes. You can learn from failing.
The trophy generation, where everybody gets a
so
trophy.
Hard.
When everybody shouldn't get a trophy. There are definitely some negatives, some downsides to that. And it can stunt a child's growth or stop the developmental growth altogether. So definitely. So another, the growth zone. I'm not sure if y'all have heard of this term before. But when parents and children enter the growth zone, it's the zone of proximal development. So this refers to the difference between what a child can do without help and what a child can achieve with guidance and encouragement from their parents. And so proximal refers to those skills that a child is close to mastering on their own. So within this zone, it's imperative that parents provide that scaffolding, and that means that they gain and maintain the child's interest to a task, that they make time for simple tasks. They emphasize certain aspects that will help the child find solutions on their own instead of just giving them the solution. And it helps the child control their emotions and the ability to actually do the task. So we have to make sure that we're not doing the task for them, but we kind of provide them the space to go out on their own and try to figure out a solution without parents intervening so much. This will help instill those skills of independence and problem solving and finding solutions. Because one thing I think kids don't understand is like how to find the answer. They're used to Google, or if you give them a map, they're like, what is this? Finding information and knowing how to find things and how to solve problems is a skill. I think this will help instill that skill. In that same concept, we have to, again, teach parents that value of failure in the education that's in that space. That's where, again, children learn. That's where they grow. That's where they become more independent and self-motivated in that space. Also in that same space, we have to teach parents how to be that shoulder for kids to cry on when things don't go well, and showing that empathy, right? We have to teach them how to listen when things are not going the way the child thinks they should go, and how to provide that verbal encouragement. And one of the trauma classes I used to teach, I don't know, the Chinese symbol, if you know, but the Chinese symbol for crisis and opportunity is the exact same symbol. And so teaching parents that when there's a crisis, that's also opportunity for growth, that's also opportunity for healing and for just overall development when going through something significant. Another, and y'all probably all seen each type of parent that we're about to talk about.
Yes,
but we've
indeed.
got to encourage parents not to be the helicopter parent, right? That 24/7 helicopter parent that's always at the school, that's always present, that's all. Not that we don't want parents at school, we do want their support, but always just intervening, doing everything for the kid 24/7. We got to encourage parents not to be that way. Or the concierge parents, right, that's constantly serving their kid, constantly making life so easy for them that they've never experienced any type of challenge whatsoever. Those babies are the ones that have the hardest time when they go away and don't have that parental supervision or support with them 24/7. I remember even as a high school counselor, probably every year, some of my students, I would say in the top 10, would always be home after that first semester, right? Because they're not used to things being a challenge for them. They don't have their parents there telling them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and they're having to think for themselves for the very first time. So that concierge parent is not helpful at all. And then we also got to be careful about not being the swooper parent and coming in and saving the day. We got to let kids figure things out for themselves within reason, right? We're not going to let something detrimental happen to our kids, but a little stress, a little challenge is not going to hurt them. And they got to have to learn how to figure out how to get through and work through those emotions and those challenges for themselves. And that's hard because we don't want to see our babies hurt, right? I have to watch myself sometimes. It's hard, but it's for the good of the kid. We do what's best for the kid, right? Not what's easiest for us.
Yeah. In my life as a dean, I can't even tell you the swooper parents that, I could not even believe the things that happened. But the funniest story in terms of, it's not funny, it's sad that this child or young adult had this relationship with his parents where he couldn't feel like he could be honest with them. He had actually dropped out of school but didn't tell his parents. Wow. And it's time for graduation. So his parents come to campus for graduation. This kid, smart guy, maybe, he put up signs all over campus, commencement is canceled. And he tried to tell his parents that there was no it got canceled for some reason. And
that's elaborate.
they quickly found out that was not the case. But, but think about the efforts that he went to, because he couldn't tell his parents that he had dropped out. He led them to believe he was going to graduate, and then comes up with this false scenario about, they canceled graduation. But we want kids to be able to share their failures as well as their successes with us. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know y'all probably seen a lot of these types of parents in your building. You could probably tell a bunch of stories. That would be a great book, right?
Yes, indeed.
So scaffolding strategy number 7 is talking about building strengths. After a child experiences growth, we got to help them to withstand those challenges and difficult times. And that's gonna be an ongoing process as they develop into adulthood. We have to instill courage and confidence, resiliency, and tenacity within children. And again, those come by experiencing challenges and not saving them every single time they experience something. We have to understand the power of the feedback that we give our kids and making sure that it is constructive feedback, that it's appropriate feedback, and that it's not teasing or belittling a kid. Because again, those words hurt, right? Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's one of the biggest lies we ever told ourselves and our kids. Words do hurt. And words do matter to these kids. And so we got to make sure that even in the constructive feedback that we give, that it's done in a loving and supportive way. So I always tell my boys, I'm like, listen, you're not perfect. Nobody is perfect, so you're going to mess up. What I want you to learn from that is, I want you to learn from whatever you do or whatever you said and grow from there, right? We want to be better today than we were yesterday. And that's kind of the approach in our house is how we approach that. Because we know they're going to mess up. They're kids, right? Their brains are not fully developed. And again, we're not perfect. So we're making sure that we don't belittle, we don't tease, but that we give very loving, constructive feedback. The next one are in this same vein is helping kids reframe negative experiences and challenges into positive one, or spaces of learning and opportunity. Again, as I told you earlier, the Chinese symbol for crisis and opportunity is the same symbol, right? So when kids mess up or experience something terrible, that's a space for them to learn and grow, right? I always share my story and how I got into the counseling profession. It was back in 2006, probably about 45 days before me and my husband got married, a drunk driver drove through my house in the middle of the night, right? I was in school for public administration, right? Completely different. I wanted to work for the government, and I had big plans for that. And that drunk driver had a different idea, right? And so from that, I learned about counseling. I didn't know counseling even existed as a profession, but I took that terrible incident and turned it into an opportunity to help educate others, because if I didn't know about counseling, I'm pretty sure other people didn't either. And so I took that as an opportunity to, you know what, I'm going to help people. And so that's what we have to teach kids, right? When we go through things, turn it into an opportunity to help others, to learn from it and grow from it. We have to teach kids to encourage them to try new things. I absolutely adore this. I think it's important that as parents, we teach them that they're not your mini-me's, right? We're not teaching kids to be our replicas. We need to figure out what their passion is, what they have an interest in, what they enjoy doing, and push them into that area. Get them to try different things. For school counselors, this can be really a great way to introduce career and college readiness activities, even as, you know, for the little ones. I know, like I said earlier, my boys are at BizTown today, and they're being DJs. Last year, they were bank tellers, right? So giving them that exposure to different activities, different things, is really fun and can create those rituals that we talked about earlier. And just, it's a good time, right? Because we don't know. And it's fun, I think, for just the family unit as a whole. For our teachers in the classroom, this could be a great way to introduce just new ideas that kids may not have the opportunity to be exposed to. So I think creating that mindset like, hey, it's fun to try new things, it helps build that independence and curiosity and self-motivation.
I love this picture. This is my grandson, Knox, and he's at a birthday party where they're doing face painting, which he's never experienced before. So you look at his face and you can tell he's like, I'm not sure about this. But notice my stepdaughter Ashley's right behind him, providing the scaffold of reassurance. It's going to be okay. And I don't know if it's Elsa or Anna, one of the Frozen characters that's there doing the face painting. So he's not sure about it. But if you look at the next slide, because the supports and scaffolding was there, now he's loving this, and you know, he experienced something new successfully.
That's really awesome, because we need to help parents to see that and help guide and support and give these children opportunities through that, because there's so much strength in that when they get the opportunity to try different things and role model that for parents, right? That's a good way for us as school counselors and teachers to role model that type of behavior. You can replicate this at home, and it doesn't have to be nothing big. It can be as easy, like my boys think, they thought for years that they had a YouTube channel. Like we told them they had one, but they really didn't. We just created, they were able to create videos on their computers, but they did a whole video on how to make lemonade, right? And they had the little cue cards, like it was the cutest thing in the world, but it was a new opportunity, something they didn't know that they could do, right? Then we found out they were making a whole bunch of other videos. That's a story for another day. We were like, oh my God, we created some little monsters here. But it was something cool that they took with them to do different videos, different just activities by themselves. So the new activities is really a cool thing to introduce to family systems and within the classroom. Teaching tenacity, this is critical. We got to teach tenacity to our kids because we know life is hard, right? Life is very challenging, and it's not, once we start adulting, it doesn't get easier, right? It gets more challenging. And so we have to teach children about honoring commitments, and that can be hard, especially if parents aren't holding commitments and honoring their commitments. And so children are not given the opportunity to see that being modeled. But we have to teach them about honoring commitments. And we have to teach parents from not jumping in again and saving the day, right? We got to teach them that, hey, you're on your own, you got this, you can do it, because that helps teaches that grit and tenacity that children need as they become adults. That is very critical for a success in those launching years and getting out on their own. Because it's so easy for parents for us to want to solve all their problems. But in the long run, that just means you're going to have a 35-year-old child still living at home. And so I know for me, I told my boys in 2030, like, y'all are out. Like, that's when you turn 18, right? And then one of them looked at me, well, can we stay tonight? And I'm like, of course, you can stay today. But in 2030, mommy wants you out, like, right? And so understanding that we've got to get you ready for that 2030 date. But yeah, we have to make sure we can't solve all their problems for them.
How many of you supervise other people? Does anybody supervise anybody else in your responsibilities? Maybe one or two. All right, so you probably can understand this even more. I supervise our teacher candidates, and there are days where I have to literally glue myself to the seat, not to jump in and save the lesson, because I see where it's going and it's like not good. So, you know, as we have to help parents understand, sometimes you just have to let the kids experience something that may not be as pleasant as you'd like it to be, because it's going to be a precious learning experience. But boy, as the bystander, when you're trying to be the scaffold, it's really hard not to jump in and solve it all for them, but
Absolutely.
can't do that.
So in teaching tenacity, be prepared. We need to teach parents to be prepared to provide that warmth and comfort, because they're going to fail, and we know that, right? So we got to be there to support them and catch them. It's also important that parents don't push their own past onto to kids. Again, we're not raising mini-me's. We are raising kids to figure out who they want to be and who their, you know, what their dreams are. And we got to make sure we're not parenting from unmet needs from our own childhood, right? Based on things we didn't get or the opportunities we didn't have. There's a lot of parents they view school based on their experience, right? Well, when I was in school, this is how the teachers were. This is how the school counselor was. We got to make sure that we change that and help them to see, like, this is not then, this is now. That's really critical. So it's the parents' responsibility, again, to help children achieve their own purpose. And lastly, we got to help parents to understand not to overreact. As Pam mentioned earlier, dysregulated parents cannot regulate a kid, right? Everybody can't be dysregulated. And so tips on how parents can get regulated before they interact with kids is super important and powerful with that interaction and with attachment as well. We got to make sure that parents get regulated, and that we teach children how to regulate themselves, how to notice when they are becoming dysregulated, right? I know for our students, I have 3 students in here, I'm so proud, but we teach them about how to, the hand-brain, right? When you're about to flip your lid and what that feels like within your body, what you experience. Do you feel hot? Do you feel it in your hands? Do you feel it in your head? So teaching kids to notice their own triggers and things like that, developing that awareness, and then what can we do to help you get regulated? Because when everybody's dysregulated, it's not going to be a good event. Scaffolding strategy number 8 is setting those realistic limitations. So this refers to maintaining safety through appropriate and natural consequences, because we know that there's good consequences, there's negative consequences whenever we do different things. We need to teach and model and reinforce those rules. We can't get lax on the rules. I know I'm so guilty of that. If my boys do something and I'm like, nope, you're not playing the Switch this whole weekend, and then they show those little pretty brown eyes, and I'm like, wait, I forgot, and they're off playing video games again. So we have to make sure that we are reinforcing, that we're modeling and teaching those rules. Kids need to know the expectations, the visible expectations and the invisible expectations, right? Because I think as adults, we have these expectations for kids. They need to know what they are and not keep them invisible. We got to make sure that they are fully aware. And just as Pam said earlier, children rise to the occasion. But we have to be sure to tell them and explain it to them at their level. That is super critical. And always, always praise the good. We have to love on our kids. That is so important. They have to know that there's something special about them, that they matter to us, and that we light up when they walk into the room. That's really critical. I tell my students all the time, if you don't light up when your babies come in the room, or you don't have hope, you need to get out of the profession, because you may be the only positive smiling face that kid sees. So we have to make sure that we praise their good efforts and things, and who they are just as people. The strategy also refers to using our words, helping parents to choose their battles. Every battle's not worth fighting, right? For me, like, if the boys, they wear whatever they want to wear, as long as it's dress code, I don't care. I just need to make sure it's clean and that it fits, but that may not happen either, right? As long as it's clean is really what my baseline is, right? Some battles are not worth fighting. I don't want to see my boys get upset before I drop them off at school, and then their day is not starting off well, and then, you know, the teachers are not starting off well because I've sent them to school upset. I know last night we had a school counseling panel in class, and one of the school counselors that were there said that the parent literally told a child, well, when you come home, your dog's going to be dead because we're putting it down, right before they got him off the car rider line. Oh. And the kid was upset the whole day, with rightfully so, right? You don't say things like that to a kid right before you drop them off. And so we have to be sure that we pick a good timing to discuss things or choose our battles very carefully. And then we also have to teach them about consequences, again, that there's good consequences to certain behaviors, there's bad consequences to certain behaviors, but whatever action or behaviors that we have, there's going to be always a consequence to it. So teaching coping skills. Some tools you can use to help parents address consequences, that can include distraction or kind of changing the channel in the kid's mind. Let's get them distracted or put their mind on something else, right? To kind of change the emotional climate that's going on, just to calm things down before you can go back and talk to your child. Because we know if you're escalated, right, you're not in a space to listen, you can't hear anything, you're not regulated and things of that nature. So getting a kid to change their mind, to get them off the issue, can kind of help calm things down so that then you can go back and have a conversation. Reframing, right? Again, taking something that's challenging and hard, that was really difficult to deal with, and turning it into an opportunity to help others to grow and to develop. Deep breathing, that was one of my favorite things as a school counselor. I was like the bubble lady. That's what they used to tell me. When you bring in the bubbles to class, right? Even I was in high school, but we would practice deep breathing using bubbles. One, because they were cheap, right? You can go to the Dollar Tree and get a whole bunch of them. But teaching, having activities for teachers to use in the classroom, there are lots of deep breathing YouTube channels that you can use to teach how you're supposed to accurately breathe and things like that. It's very helpful. And then again, using expressiveness, using your words, teaching kids how to name their feelings, how to discuss their feelings, and even at the little grades, right? Giving them the vocabulary, because we know that executive functioning is not fully developed, right? This part of the brain is not fully developed to have the vocabulary for those words, for those emotions. So we have to make sure that we're giving kids and parents the words that they can use to describe their emotions.
Yeah, so important. Oh, I think I'm up next, yeah.
Okay.
Just thinking about those words things, I used to do a program called Divorce Care for kids that were going through divorce, with their families were going through divorce. And one of the first things we'd have the kids do as they came to the session each night was find a picture that described what they were feeling, how their emotions were that night. So we get a sense of where they were at before we even got started. And that was really helpful for us and also for them to learn to share how they were feeling, even if it was in a nonverbal way. So as we think about helping parents and teachers deal with challenging behaviors, I love the idea that if we're going to have to discipline a child, we want to do it with dignity. Our goal is to help shape the child's behavior, not inflict pain. Ideally, in any kind of issue related to helping children with behavior issues, our goal is for them to manage their own behavior. And so inflicting pain is not the goal and not our purpose. For both parents and teachers, it's so important that calmness, being neutral. You don't want to deal with something when you're ready to blow a gasket. You know, you have to be calm enough to address the situation. And sometimes it may be helpful for parents to understand that you may need to wait to deal with the situation if you can't do it in a calm and adult way. So sometimes we have to take that time out for ourselves to regain our self-control before we can address something. One of the things that we teach our teacher candidates is the idea of knowing your why. When we think about children that are acting out in some way, to consider Why are they doing this? What is the goal of their misbehavior? What is causing them, not what's wrong with you, as we talk about in trauma training, but what happened to you? Why are you acting this way? What is your goal? What do you need? And so really thinking about how can we meet unmet needs as we try to help children learn how to regulate their behavior. One of the great strategies that helps with this is logical consequences. You know, if you cannot use material, whether it be in the classroom or at home, in an appropriate way, you'll lose the privilege of having access to it for a period of time. So things that connect logically so they can see the cause and effect. As Tiffany said, their brains aren't fully developed yet. Sometimes kids don't make those connections appropriately. And so we want to help them see that if you do this, this is going to be the result. I always use this example when I talk to my teacher candidates about kids linking things together that aren't logical. So I think I was teaching 2nd or 3rd grade, and we were doing a health lesson on the dangers of smoking, and the kids are writing these essays about how smoking is not good for your health and why you shouldn't do it, blah, blah, blah. And this one child writes, "My mom smoked. She had to go to the hospital and have her tubes tied." So totally linking things that didn't go together, but you know, kids are illogical. They don't always link causes and effects together appropriately. So we want to help them understand logical consequences to their behaviors so that they can make better choices. Scaffolding strategy number 9. This one's so important. Support unconditionally. Whether we're a parent, whether we're a teacher, a counselor, we want to be there for that child. We have to be that scaffold and support them appropriately. But again, as Tiffany said earlier, you don't decide who your child is. It's so hard sometimes as a parent not to want your child to be a certain way. They're their own person. We can't force them to be what we want them to be. But we can help them grow into an independent, functioning, healthy adult. But we have to encourage that along the way. And one of the ways we do that is that we encourage age-appropriate decision-making. We give them opportunities to have some choices. Now, with young children, you start out with very limited choices. You know, do you want to go to Burger King or McDonald's? You have 2 choices. You choose between the one. What I always try to tell parents is if you give your child choices, it is imperative that you can live with either choice that you offer them. Because if you opt not to give them the choice that you offered, they lose trust in you. So before you offer a choice, make sure you can live with it, because otherwise you destroy the good efforts that you've made to build their decision-making skills. So age-appropriate decision-making, you know, whether it be you can choose what you wear or which vegetable you want to eat or whatever it is. You don't want to get into those battles, but they need our support in growing to learn how to make good decisions. Helping kids understand what their attributes are, as well as things that they might need to work on. Using words that affirm them when they do something appropriately, or if they have a skill or a talent, or they've done something well, or put good effort into something. All those things help us to provide that unconditional support that is so desperately needed. As parents, it's really hard to be realistic sometimes about our child's deficits. No child is perfect. They're going to have strengths and weaknesses. If there's something that we can do to address that deficit, we want to provide that support. Same thing for a teacher. When they see that a child struggles in an area, we want to make sure that that support's provided and the appropriate help is provided. But sometimes, as a parent, I think it's really hard not to feel like whatever happens with your child reflects on you and your quality as a parent. And we can't go there, because that's really, each child has to be what they are, who they are. And so we don't want to put that on us. The last scaffolding strategy is to repair and minimize the cracks. Thinking about what challenges are out there, how do we address them? So if there is a problem, whether that be academic, social, behavioral, we want to face it head on. We want to get the supports that we need for the child. One of the great resources that we wanted to share with you is the Child Mind organization has a symptom checker that can be really helpful as a first step for parents or caregivers, where they can go on to that website and list the things that they notice in the child and see. Sometimes it's hard for a parent to know, how serious is this? Do they need counseling? Do they need support in some way? So that symptom checker is a great resource you can share, where parents can at least have a starting point to address some of their questions and concerns that they're not sure about. In repairing and minimizing the cracks, we have to stay flexible and realize we're going to have to go with the flow sometimes, and things might not go in the direction we think, but we're going to try to meet that child where they are and support them and help them as best we can. Nagging. Oh. It's really hard. I don't know, maybe moms are more guilty of this, but it's really hard not to get into that nagging cycle, especially if it's something that really gets on your nerves. Same thing for teachers. We really need to try to step away from that. Again, not that we don't address challenging behaviors or issues, but we want to try to work towards helping them grow, not to put them down or be critical. Yes, you need to address what the issue is, but there's better ways to do that. As parents and teachers and counselors, none of us are perfect. Cut yourself some slack when you make a mistake. You're not perfect. You're never going to be. You're human, and so sometimes we mess up or don't do things in the best possible way. I think about this profession, the professions that we're in, we're constantly learning and growing. I've been doing this for 44 years and I still feel like it's the tip of the iceberg. I'm just beginning to understand how to do some things because there's always more to learn. So I think if you have that attitude that I'm not going to do it perfectly, but I'm going to do the very best I can with the skills and knowledge I have, and I'm just going to continue to grow and learn new things so that I can be better at what I do. And I think if you help parents understand that, if you understand that in your professional role, I think that will help. And in terms of repairing and minimizing the cracks, we want to help remind parents again the importance of those bonding rituals, how essential that is to keep things working well, to keep those supports in place to help the child to grow. Final structural checks. You want to strive to scaffold children towards I can do it. If we do everything for them, they're not going to get to that place. So we've got to gradually build to that place. It's going to vary for each child in terms of how much scaffolding or support that they need. But we want to instill a sense of competence, independence, and optimism. This is my granddaughter, Charlotte. She kind of oozes confidence. She is a force to be reckoned with. But, she is very independent, very determined to do things her way, and, you'll learn to work with that in the best possible way. We want to try to promote what's called a growth mindset. And did I take, nope, okay, I want to make sure I'm on the right slide here, Tiffany. I think I'm just leading up to your next piece, but we want kids to believe that they can learn it, they can do it. Again, if our thought is, oh, they're never going to be able to do this, guess what? They're never going to be able to do it. So we have to believe they can do it if we want them to be able to do it. Remember, the scaffolding can be adjusted to support more or to take some of that support away. The scaffolding is not meant to be permanent. Now, going back to the chapel at the Air Force Academy, that scaffolding is not going to come off to around 2026, which just blows my mind that it's going to take that long. But some things take time to build the appropriate structure. Same thing with kids. It's going to take time. So at some point, some of that scaffolding, eventually all of it will have to come down. But it's kind of a give and take, and you learn as you go, and you take and remove the scaffolding as appropriate. All right, there we go.
So as school counselors and teachers, y'all probably have all seen this and heard about this, but we need to make sure that we have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? And so that fixed mindset is that appearance, oh, that you're smart, we avoid failures, we avoid challenges, and that failure defines who you are as a person, and that feedback that you get is very personal in nature, right? That is what we want to steer away from. What we want to go towards is the growth mindset, right? That goal is to learn, is to confront uncertainty, embrace the challenges. Again, that failure provides learning, that failure provides information, and that feedback is about your current capabilities, right? So that's the kind of mindset that we want our kids to have, that we want our parents to have, and that we set that tone in the classroom and in our schools. So some helpful tips just in general, and I feel like you guys already, for the school counselors, already know this stuff. We can't tackle the mental health issue that is going on in our schools by ourselves. We need everybody's help in that area. So collaboration, I think, is so critical in the work that we do with school counselors. We need to figure out ways to share interventions, to share strategies with our colleagues, and that goes from administration all the way down to the custodial staff. I tell my students all the time, custodians are probably my most favorite people in the building. I take care of Mr. Bowe, that's the custodian at my boys' school, because I know he looks out for my kids. Whenever we do, when we connect kids with mentors and things like that, I always included custodial staff, cafeteria workers, because one, they see the kids in a way that we may not see them, how they interact with their peers. They may know them in a different way. So we gotta make sure that we use everybody in the building, not just the teachers, not just the administrators. We have to figure out a way to collect this data. We know data, having a comprehensive school counseling program, data is critical to the work that we do. If you're not a fan of data, we gotta get you caught up. Okay, data is critical in the work that we do. That is how we communicate to the needs that we have as school counselors, and that's how we get things done. It will let administrators know what the issues are going on in the school, how we can help parents, how we can help teachers. We have to be sure that we understand, and also interpret data for people. That is so important. And lastly, we got to advocate. Right? We got to advocate for the kids, and we got to advocate for our profession. We have got to let people know what we're trained to do, and what we know as school counselors, because we know a lot, and a lot of times we're not given the space to do those things. So we got to make sure that we are doing a lot of advocacy work, not only for parents and students, but also for our roles as school counselors.
Okay. From a teacher's perspective, I would just say, or emphasize the importance of communicating with teachers, listen to them. I'd encourage you, if you could, to reach out to those beginning teachers, because they are going to be so overwhelmed with all their responsibilities. They may be afraid to seek you out, but if you make the effort to reach out to them and let them know you're there for them, I think that could be a great opening for a collaborative effort where you could really support each other's work effectively. Again, as I shared earlier, a lot of beginning teachers are going to feel like, I don't want anybody to know, I don't know what I'm doing. But if you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm here to support you, I think that could really be valuable. One of the things I've loved about collaborating with Tiffany is now we're helping our teacher candidates understand what school counselors do, understand their expertise. I mean, I can do a program on trauma for my students, but Tiffany's going to be able to bring a whole different level of expertise to that when she comes to talk to them about trauma. So we really can work together effectively to do what's best for our students and their families, so it's a win-win for everybody. So I guess if my best advice would be reach out to those teachers, especially the beginning ones, be there to support them, help them learn about resources. As a young teacher, dealing with families is very intimidating because especially if you're young and you're single and you don't have children yourself, you're thinking, oh my goodness, like what advice am I going to offer these parents? I remember my teacher ed program, we had to do a parent training workshop, and I thought, oh my gosh, like these people are going to listen to us? What do we know? So your support and encouragement and resources will just be invaluable. So that would probably be the main thing that I would share. So now it's your turn to ask questions and see if there's things, I don't know if it's a question you had on your IQ card or maybe something else that has surfaced. What are some things that perhaps we can address for you?
And let me remind everyone in the room and online, if you're online, please add questions in the chat.
Awesome.
So meanwhile, in the room, let's have some questions.
So my question was, you guys said that you can adjust the scaffolding, and I was curious if during your research or over your careers, if you've noticed how to adjust those for parents of children with like neurodivergent like disorders or behavior issues, if there's any way you might recommend or advise that they adjust the scaffolding for those children.
So I think when that happens, right, I think the most important part is educating the parent on what's going on, right, because that might be new territory for them, and so providing them information on things to expect, things they may need to notice, things like that can be helpful in adjusting the scaffolding, because they may not know how to adjust because that's a whole new world for them. And then also understanding the emotions that this isn't the child that I thought I had, and understanding the grief that may come with that, because that's a hard reality when you have this vision of a kid and it's not that vision anymore. And so there's a lot of adjusting the scaffolding I think you have to consider, but I think understanding the grief that may come with that, but also understanding the education piece that the parent's going to have so they can readjust, and also for the kid as well.
So in a lot of ways, like you would say that the school counselor is providing scaffolding for the parent. So
For sure.
Scaffolding for their children.
Absolutely. I think as a whole, I think the school community as a whole would have to do that, because again, we're not working in silos, but having that collaborative effort to support the parent. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of an experience from my own teaching. I had a second grader who, great student, parents were very supportive. Everything seemed to be going really well, and all of a sudden, she's showing all these signs of school phobia. I mean, her parents are like literally physically dragging her out of the car. She's kicking and screaming and hysterical, totally unlike this child. So the school counselor, the school nurse, myself, I think maybe the principal was involved too. We all had to work with the family and help them provide needed supports for that child. What we found out is the child was reacting to the death of her grandfather. But what was really going on is the mother was having a complete meltdown with losing her father. And so the child was responding to the mother's inability to deal with it. She wanted to be there at home to support her mother because she knew her mother was having a meltdown. So, it took a lot to get to the point where we figured out what was going on and were able to provide that support. So that child, that family needed a lot more supports than they had prior to the death of the grandfather. And it was a temporary thing. Eventually, those supports were able to be removed, but, we had to take some steps to address what was going on.
So in that case, I was just going to add one more thing before I hand it over here. So in that case, the modeling really comes in handy or is critical, because if your child is suffering or struggling with a neurodivergent disorder or anything like that, then modeling your response to it.
Well, and we have to rule out things. Of what it could be,
But the child was responding to the mother's I don't want to say overreaction, that's probably a bad term, but the mother was, having a difficult time, and the child was responding to that.
Hello, I was really interested in the survey that you conducted. I was really wanting to know, where did you get your questions? Like what resource I might be able to find to be able to build a survey so I can find out what my parents want for as far as small groups or how I might meet the needs of their children, and also survey my teachers and see what things that they're seeing. And then how do you get that back? Like, have you Have you found a good way to get that paperwork back that's been really effective? And I think for my personal school, I'm thinking maybe like some sort of coupon or something, like where you trade it in and get some, I don't know, dessert or something somewhere. But I didn't know whether you had some suggestions on getting that.
You want to talk about the survey, and I'll talk about
I
those.
can't remember the name of it. Oh, gosh.
The parent.
The parent.
There was a published.
It's,
It was
yeah,
a
by
published
pediatric.
survey.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
I feel embarrassed.
pediatric symptom
Survey
survey.
or something, and it's translated in like 30 something languages online, and it's open to the public. And Pediatric symptoms, I think that's what it
Yeah.
is. Yes. And then we added just a few other questions, like do you have an IEP or 504 plan, or if you like are currently receiving services. But the main part of it is the pediatric symptom survey. And like I said, it's open. You can Google it. There's tons of data on it, on the efficacy of the survey itself. But it's a quick, they have a 17 item option, or there's I think 36 item option in the survey. But the language part is what I really appreciated, because it was translated in several different languages. So you can use it with almost any population in your schools. As far as getting people to take the survey, that's a hard one, because we sent
We
it
sent
out to
8,000 surveys we sent out, and we got 100
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was challenging, but
Yeah.
you know,
But the data we did get back was really good.
yeah.
We've got a couple of questions online. One comes from the earlier part of the presentation, and it said, you mentioned not to engage with poor behavior, but did not mention what to do instead. What are your suggestions?
Not sure I
That
understand
was
the
from
question.
earlier in the presentation.
So, wait, can you repeat that question?
Sure. You mentioned not to engage with poor behavior, but did not mention what to do instead. So what are your suggestions?
So I think engaging, I don't think we need to like harp on it, right? We need to acknowledge that it happened, but I think when we get into a space where you're constantly just, that's how you identify the kid, and that's all you focus on when you're dealing with that kid, I think that's when it becomes very negative. And so I think correcting the behavior, teaching other ways to address whatever the situation is, and teaching healthier ways of handling situations, I think is what we need to focus on. Instead of the bad behavior, focus on what the child can do to adapt to new and positive and healthier behaviors.
Yeah, and I think that's where the use of collecting some data might come in handy. So let's say the child is getting in trouble at school, and you know, maybe the parent could, every time the child comes home, how are you today? How did you do? Did you behave? You know, if they're constantly harping on the focus on that bad behavior, that's probably not going to solve anything. But maybe keeping track, all right, today we didn't hear any bad reports. Let's celebrate that. And then the next day, all right, well today maybe you had a problem, you were calling out too much. So really keeping track of how often is this happening, how serious is it, what can we do, what can we talk about together to try to solve this, so that the focus isn't just on the negative behavior, but it's look at the progress you're making, how can we continue to build on that, what can we do to do even better with this, so that it's not all about the negative things, because that just creates a whole negative mindset in the child's head, and you know, that doesn't really help move them in a positive direction.
And there's one more question online. How do we help parents realize their own triggers as they are dealing with their problematic children, as both parent and child try to cope with the situation?
Well, that's a good one. I would approach that in a supportive way, because we don't want to tell parents what's wrong with them, right? That may not go over too well. But just bring that awareness. I think in how you use your words. What, you know, did you notice, you know, if you were if it was a tough situation going on with you, you know, I would try to bring the awareness for the parent to see things, but making sure that you use your words very carefully, because what we don't want to do is shame a parent and make a parent feel guilty and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, I think, in any kind of trauma training that we do, we talk about let's look at ourselves first, because that may influence how we respond to situations. But I think you have to be very delicate, kid gloves, in terms of, again, we never want to get into the shaming or it's your fault they're acting this way. But, we're all influenced by our past in some way. And so how can we avoid letting that be a negative thing in the life of your child? We all have stuff.
Yes,
So.
very true.
So I have two quick questions. One is, how can we, oh good, it works, as professionals in the building that don't have a full-time caseload, class load, encourage, influence, persuade teachers to do that 3-to-1 ratio about appreciation, versus criticism? How can we encourage, especially because you said you were working with, what are some things we can do outside of it being mandated by the principal or administrator? What are some other ways we can help see the value in that?
One thing that comes to mind is if you approached, probably teachers individually and say, hey, is there anything going on in your classroom that I can help with? Are you facing any management problems or whatever? Let's sit down together and maybe talk about it. And through that, you can integrate or introduce those ideas of, here's something you might want to try. With this child who is constantly on your last nerve, what about if you kept track of how many times you affirm the child versus address something that needs to be addressed? And, I think probably on a one-on-one basis, you're probably going to win more. But just making yourself available, like, hey, is there anything I can help you with? Are you having any discipline issues that maybe I could help support you with? That might be a starting point.
And I'm in a middle school, there's always issues. So, and my second thing is, how do you, especially with a teacher being in that room all day, 120 kids, so how do you help them to not internalize? It's kind of that self-care, and understand there's a story behind the story. And then sometimes I can't share the story behind the story. So how do we do that in a discreet, positive, how does that work? Any suggestions?
I think teaching people to understand, anybody that works in education, that a child's behavior is a form of communication, but it's also not about you. And I think understanding that from the jump start, that's the reality of children in K-12 schools, and that they often just replicate the relationships or the communication patterns and styles that they see at home. So again, it's not about you. And just understanding that, I think, as a foundation, I think is critical in that. And there was something else she said. Oh, and I think the other part, as school counselors, we can't always share everything. And so I think that goes to building relationships with our teachers so that they will trust us, that when I tell you something, just go with me on this. But I think that I think trust and relationships have to be developed with our teachers so that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Dr. Wilson, Dr. Ertel, thank you for this session
welcome.
today. Our parents are such a key link in our work with children.